This is the Everyday AI Show, the everyday podcast where we simplify AI and bring its power to your fingertips. Listen daily for practical advice to boost your career, business, and everyday life.
OpenAI shipped about 3 months of updates over the course of 3 days. Google held its Cloud Next conference and finally rolled out the version of Gemini many have wanted for years. And the White House has accused China of industrial-scale AI theft from U.S. companies. All of these are pretty big AI developments, but the biggest story in AI news this week might have been the top secret Anthropic Mythos model that they said was too much of a cyber threat to release to the public, yet some randoms on a Discord server got access just by guessing the URL and went undetected for weeks. Yeah, there's a lot that happened this week in AI. And when making decisions on how your company approaches and uses AI, you absolutely have to keep up to date with the latest happenings, news, and releases. But to do that, it's going to take you hours every single day, unless you just tune in with us on Mondays as we bring you the AI news that matters. Let's get into it. If you're new here, welcome. My name's Jordan Wilson, and this is Everyday AI. It's a daily live stream podcast and free daily newsletter helping everyday business leaders like you and me keep up with the non-stop updates that are happening from big tech. I tell you what's important, what's not, and how to use it to grow your company and career. So if that's what you're doing, make sure to go to youreverydayai.com. We're going to be recapping both all of the news from today's story as well as everything else happening in the AI world. So if you are FYI, if you're listening to this today and you happen to be in San Francisco or, Silicon Valley, make sure to hit me up. I'm going to be out in San Francisco for a couple of days at the Sage Future conference. So I do in the show notes, I always have my link to my LinkedIn. So go ahead and send me a message. Let me know where you're going to be. All right. Let's get into it. Yeah. If you are new here on Mondays, we do the AI news that matters. On Wednesdays, we usually go hands-on and do more of a demo with a big release from that week. On Fridays, we do AI Feature Fridays, highlighting some of the, AI features that roll out to large language models. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, we kind of rotate the shows. So that's kind of our lineup for the week. But let's get started because OpenAI, they had their biggest week undoubtedly since December of 2024. That's when they had their kind of ship miss event where they, for the first time, brought out reasoning models, Sora, all of these other things. But OpenAI absolutely dominated this week, and it was not even close. All right, so here's just a preview of what they did. So this week included, launching the world's new top-ranked model in GPT 5.5, a much stronger image model, also best in the world with images too, and what I think a lot of people have been asking for a long time, agents that work inside of ChatGPT and can access your company's data. And they had a bunch of Codex updates as well. All right, let's start at the top. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly because if I'm being honest, I could probably talk for at least 30 minutes about just these updates, but we did go over these in a little more depth when we covered our Friday features, and that was episode 763 from Friday. So this will be a faster version, although we could talk the entire episode. All right, so let's talk about GPT 5.5. So it is now live, both inside ChatGPT and it is available on the API side as well for builders. It is live and positioned as OpenAI's most capable general purpose model. And if you haven't used it, I suggest you do. It's really good. All right. So it matches GPT-5.4's per token latency while scoring higher on benchmarks. So it's as fast but smarter. OpenAI says it excels at coding, tool use, research, and handling messy multi-step tasks with better ambiguity resolution. GPT 5.5 also reportedly ties or beats human experts on the GDP Val benchmark. So about 85% of the time, which is kind of nuts to think about, with large gains in agentic coding, computer operation, knowledge work, and early scientific research. All right, so that's GPT 5.5. Then images 2. My gosh, this one, I don't know. This might sound crazy. obviously, people are going to be using the model itself, GPT 5.5 more, that powers, probably millions of companies and different products. But I think the one that visually got the most attention was Images 2, because this is a step change in what was available before when it comes to AI media generation. And I'm not saying AI image, because it can accomplish a lot more than that. So Images 2 is OpenAI's new flagship image model, and it was launched broadly, which does include access to free tiers as well. And it delivers stronger editing, better composition and layout, and near production typography, multilingual text supports, 2K resolution, a wide range of aspect ratios, and up to 8 coherent images that you can create just from a single prompt. So Images 2 dramatically improved text rendering and compositional consistency, making it practical for, well, things you might want in a photo, such as signs, if you're mocking up user interfaces, graphics. One thing I've been testing it out and using for, it's really good at creating presentations, infographics, etc. A lot of times before with ChatGPT's earlier version, especially Images 1, the original, it didn't get the text correct. A lot of times, it might just mess up a couple of letters. So to use it, you'd probably have to go and clean it up. And there's a lot of character inconsistencies. And this has definitely changed with Images 2. All right. And I think probably, right. And I think the reason why I might tackle this one on Wednesday, I think there's just so many use cases now because of that quality jump, right? Like before, you could use it for project images, you could use it for infographics, you could use it for, updating your stock photography online. But there was still, for the average person, if you didn't really iterate on it, or if you didn't know what you were doing, I still think you were left with something that looked like AI, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing. And that does obviously have scary implications for now what is possible. But now I think it's at the point where people, even who don't have, reps using, AI image generators, can go in and get something that looks literally top tier professional. So I think we're going to, on Wednesday, do our deep dive, putting AI to work, going hands-on with Images 2. All right, next, Workspace agents. These are really, really cool. So if you've been using Codex to build at all, well, these are powered by Codex, but Workspace agents are a new shared cloud running agent feature available inside of ChatGPT. Yeah, so these are available on the web. You don't have to be, running these via Codex. So they are cloud running agent features for team plans only right now. So that's ChatGPT Business, Enterprise, EDU, and teachers. And they can automate long-running workflows. They can be scheduled. They can be deployed into Slack. And you can operate across tools with admin control for permissions and approvals. All right, one of the downsides with this, and still not a lot of clarity, well, number one, are they replacing GPTs? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I'll find out. Also, they are free for now if you have one of those paid plans, right? So sorry, I should say they are included for now in those paid business plans. But OpenAI did say that is only until May 6th. So we're not sure if at that point there's just going to be limits, or if they are going to be just charged at an extra rate. So we'll see, but it's only going to be available here for a couple of weeks. So I would encourage, if you have one of those team plans like I do, start taking advantage of them. They're really, really cool, right? I've been running the similar version of these types inside Codex, right? But bringing them into ChatGPT, into the team's environment, it's just a way for, non-technical teams, well, to be able to use these, but then to obviously run them in the cloud. Because if you are, building these agents in Codex, they're easy. It's natural language. You don't have to have really any programming or technical skills. But the downside of using them in Codex is, well, your machine has to be on, right? So the big advantage here of the workflow agents is, number one, you can share them across teams. And number two, they don't have to be tied to a local device. They run in the cloud. All right. And next, last, yes, so many updates here. Codex saw a lot of under the radar upgrades. So there's the new Chronicle feature, right, which is very similar to the controversial Windows Copilot recall feature. It essentially remembers everything that's been on your screen. That is opt-in only, and it's in research preview. There's now browser control skill, which works really, really well, a little bit different and better in some instances than computer use. There's a new Google Sheets and slide skills, and now there's also an operating system-wide dictation. So yeah, they literally, inside of Codex, essentially just shipped an app that you can use that you can just dictate anywhere, right? So that part is pretty cool as well. All right, so we won't keep talking. We made it through in about 6 minutes. Not bad, considering literally, I think just those updates right there are going to fundamentally change how people work, period. Just those three. Huge week for OpenAI. So congrats to the team there. Next. AI moves too fast to follow, but you're expected to keep up. Otherwise, your career or company might lag behind while AI native competitors leap ahead. But you don't have 10 hours a day to understand it all. That's what I do for you. But after 700 plus episodes of Everyday AI, the most common questions I get is, where do I start? That's why we created the Start Here series, an ongoing podcast series of more than a dozen episodes you can listen to in order. It covers the AI basics for beginners and sharpens the skills of AI champions pushing their companies forward. In the ongoing series, we explain complex trends in simple language that you can turn into action. There's 3 ways to jump in. Number 1, go scroll back to the first one in episode 691. Number 2, tap the link in your show notes at any time for the Start Here series, or you can just go to starthereseries.com, which also gives you free access to our Inner Circle community where you can connect with other business leaders doing the same. The Start Here series will slow down the pace of AI so you can get ahead. The White House has accused China of industrial-scale AI theft. So the Office of Science and Technology Director issued a memo last week saying Chinese entities are using thousands of proxy accounts and jailbreaking techniques to run industrial-scale campaigns that distill advanced U.S. AI models into less capable versions, according to both the White House memo and reporting from the Financial Times. So if this sounds familiar, Anthropic came out kind of exposing this a couple of months ago. The big companies as well have hinted about this. In February, I think was the month when OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic all came out and said, yeah, China is distilling our models. And now the US government is confirming this and getting involved as well. So if you don't know what distillation is, it is using outputs from stronger models to train weaker ones. So in short, what the US government is now saying is that Chinese entities signed up thousands of proxy accounts and essentially would put prompts into the strong models from Anthropic, from OpenAI, from Google's and others, and they would essentially just use it, right? Like cheating on their homework. And then they would use that to train their own models. So that is what distillation means. So you can derive information from the original, more powerful model to usually make a weaker model. So the White House warns those distilled models frequently lack the security and safety protocols embedded in the U.S. versions, creating potential national security and public safety risks when released externally. The administration says it is sharing intelligence about these extraction campaigns with U.S.-based AI companies and will collaborate with the private sector to develop technical defenses and detection strategies. So the U.S. has moved to curb technology transfer to China as the global AI race intensifies, and the policy context includes the controversy over the U.S. export decisions, such as allowing NVIDIA to sell H200 GPU chips to China after earlier controls on their H20 chips. So this is not a surprise that this is happening, but this is also one of those reasons I think there is this big wave of momentum about a year ago when the DeepSeek model came out last January of everyone saying, oh my gosh, these Chinese AI models, you should be using them at all times. Are they powerful? Absolutely. Are they distilled from US models exclusively? Probably not, right? But a good majority of them are. So here you have a pretty significant step here with the US government coming on, and they're not, outright saying don't use these, but they are warning against them because they say they lack the security and safety protocols that US versions have. So, this is one of those kind of I wouldn't even call it a gray area yet. It's not a gray area because a lot of the Chinese models, I think, were developed and created and deployed in a responsible and ethical manner, but many of them were not, right? So this is always one of those interesting points of contentions in bigger enterprise companies in the US. When they look at some of these Chinese models and they're like, wait, we could, cut our AI costs down by, 500 grand a month by using, model X from China. Why wouldn't we? So we'll see here. I don't know if this will get to the point where we see potential restrictions on AI model use, but we have seen that at state levels. We have seen that in certain departments in governments, them not being allowed to use certain models. Out of China anyways. All right. Our next piece of AI news, the version of Google Gemini, I think most people have wanted for the past 2 years, right? Since Bard became Gemini, everyone's like, wait, why can't Gemini just work everywhere and bring your context no matter where you're accessing it? Because obviously you can access Google Gemini from a myriad of places. Well, now you can. Well, it's rolling out, not available to everyone now, but Google at their Google Cloud Next conference announced Workspace intelligence into its Workspace apps. And that lets Gemini access emails, chats, docs, sheets, slides, and Drive to create context-aware drafts, edits, and summaries that mirrors a user's past preferences and company templates. And this is a pretty big shift that aims to save companies time and reduce switching between files and programs. So Google says the system builds on its personal intelligence, right, which was released for personal Gmail accounts a couple of months ago, which kind of ties it to Gmail and Photos, but it now applies that same personalized access across the company's productivity suite inside of Google Workspace. So when asked inside of a doc or a slide deck, Google Gemini can now use stored workspace context. So that's past edits, templates that your company has created, or style choices to produce drafts, apply image edits, handle comments, or even generate slide decks that match corporate visuals automatically. Google describes Workspace intelligence as able to retrieve relevant emails, chats, files, and information from the web to produce polished outputs in your exact voice, brand, and templates, reducing manual formatting and context switching. Gmail, yay. All right. I'm excited for when this one does finally roll out to Workspace accounts, but Gmail now gains new tools called the AI Inbox and AI overviews, right? They have been testing the AI overviews in certain Workspace accounts, but not the full AI inbox, which had been relegated to just Gmail accounts previously on their ultra pricey ultra plan. But that AI inbox turns the inbox in your Gmail into a task-centered view to help users catch up faster, while AI overviews produces short summaries of email threads to surface key points quickly. All right, so this is being rolled out now, all right, but no word on exactly when companies are getting it. It's just certain companies are getting it. All right, so it is also going to be dependent on the feature, and they're rolling out to Workspace customers over time. All right. Our next piece of AI news, Anthropic just cashed a lot of checks. All right. Well, I don't think they actually cash checks, right? Like if you get $40 billion from Google, I don't think they give you the big checks like you won the lottery. Although maybe we should start to normalize something like that. It would be pretty funny and, interesting to watch. But Google will invest at least $10 billion and then could put up another $30 billion for $40 billion new investment in Anthropic if the company meets certain agreed upon milestones, which could value the company at more than $350 billion for the initial tranche. So Google Cloud will provide Anthropic as well with 5 gigawatts of compute, which is a ton over 5 years, mostly via their new and now updated, I believe their 8th version of their TPUs, their tensor processing units, which materially expand Anthropic's access to large-scale infrastructure for training and serving generative models. So this new deal, up to $40 billion new capital investments just from Google, follows Anthropic's February funding that implied a $380 billion post-money valuation and comes alongside Amazon's also new recent additional $5 billion commitment. So Alphabet, shares, so Google parent company, jumped on the news of their big investment in Anthropic. So why is this important, right? Why do we talk so much about fundraising? It's not just because Anthropic and OpenAI and, SpaceX now, which includes X and Grok and all these other things, right? It's not just because these companies are racing toward an IPO, and that's obviously going to impact anyone's portfolio, right? Because AI is driving the economy and the stocks here in the US. But more importantly, if you are an Anthropic user, if your team if your company uses Anthropic, the past month has been absolutely horrendous in terms of uptime. I actually put a chart out on this, but the uptime is not even what you would need for a bare minimum to be required for enterprise software, right? So the uptimes are very bad right now for Anthropic. So this is good news because if you are an Anthropic user, I don't know if they'll change their rates or their rate limits, but hopefully this means that their uptime will increase as they're able to bring more compute power on in the coming months and years, both with this deal with Google Cloud to be able to bring on additional 5 gigawatts of compute, but also with this big capital infusion. All right. One company going in the opposite direction, not growing, but shrinking, at least when it comes to their people, is Meta. So according to Axios, Meta will lay off about 8,000 employees, which is about 10% of its workforce, as part of an efficiency push tied to soaring AI-related costs. So the reductions underscore investor pressure after Meta said their capital expenditure could rise at least 60% this year versus 2025 to support its new Meta Superintelligence Labs and its core business. While its free cash flow is forecast to fall also about 83% year over year. So this follows earlier large-scale cuts at Meta. So if you remember back kind of post-pandemic, they cut more than 20,000 jobs there in 2022 to 2023. And this just moves across big tech, including Amazon's planned 16,000 cuts, Microsoft offering buyouts to a big percentage of its staff, and some recent layoffs at Block, Salesforce, Snap, and others, showing industry-wide cost pruning amid AI investment. So the news also follows report that Meta may reportedly be collecting employee keystrokes to train their models, highlighting privacy and ethical trade-offs as firms seek richer internal data to accelerate AI development. Yeah, it's one of those stories, right, where we've seen a lot of headlines that, essentially, from this Meta keystroking, accusation that came out in the media, that essentially people that are still working at Meta are, for all intent and purposes, just training their eventual replacement, right? Because they're collecting now every single thing that's happening. So even if, employees aren't explicitly training models, well, they maybe are, at least according to reports. All right. A couple more pieces of AI news. This one also from Google Next. And Google announced at their Google Cloud Next conference that Vertex AI has been rebranded and expanded into the Gemini Enterprise Agent Platform, a unified service to build, scale, govern, and monitor agentic AI across enterprises. So the platform is designed for agent building and orchestration, offering Visual Agent Studio and an Agent Development Kit, or ADK, plus a runtime for long-running agents with persistent memory to retain context across sessions. So Google says their model garden now exposes over 200 models, including its own Gemini 3.1 Pro, Gemini 3.1 Flash Image, Lyria 3, its music model, and Gemma 4, which I personally have been loving and using a ton. And the platform supports multi-agent coordination, so tasks can be split across specialized agents and tools. In the update, Google says that governance and security are central. Agents receive cryptographic IDs, a centralized registry catalogs, approved agents and tools, and a gateway plus monitoring and anomaly detection models help enforce access policies and surface suspicious behavior. All right. So, we are now seeing, Vertex going from what was kind of before a more technical platform, right? You would think more of, oh, this is an IT-esque platform, to now it's being kind of rebranded the Gemini Enterprise Agent platform. So I'm guessing that, this is going to bring more users potentially onto the platform versus where I think maybe previously Vertex was just, your ML people, your head of AI, your IT type. But with this, you might start getting even some of your non-technical people now using the platform, bringing the visual agent builder and the agent coordination into the fold for more, which I personally think is smart. I mean, we'll actually see from a user interface, user experience, right? Because Vertex, I mean, at least for me personally, there was a little bit of a learning curve to understand how to use Vertex. So we'll see what it actually means for end users, and if Google's, if one of their ultimate goal is just to get more non-technical people using the platform. All right. In our last big AI news story of the week, you can't make this one up. So yes, that Mythos model that was too powerful to release to the world. Well, yeah, some people on Discord got access to it and used it for weeks just by guessing the URL. So apparently it wasn't too good at cyber. So, according to Bloomberg, a private Discord group claims it located and had access Anthropic's Claude Mythos preview model for more than 2 weeks simply by guessing the model's online location from past Anthropic naming patterns. Yeah, and a recent data leak. So Anthropic has described Mythos as powerful enough to identify and then exploit zero-day vulnerabilities in every major operating system and every major web browser. And they offered limited preview access in the invite-only Project Glasswing program that was, they said, intended to help secure critical software. So Bloomberg reports the Discord group's access relied not on any complex cyber techniques. It wasn't even a breach, but one member just had privileged credentials as an Anthropic contractor, and the group then provided evidence convincing Bloomberg that the access to the model was real. So the group said it used Mythos for benign tasks such as building simple websites, and they claimed the access to additional unreleased Anthropic models as well, though Anthropic is investigating and said there's no sign of wider compromise so far. So Anthropic did acknowledge the report to Bloomberg, saying it is investigating claims of unauthorized access to Mythos through a third-party vendor, and that it currently has no evidence the incident affected Anthropic's own system or extended beyond that vendor's environment. So we covered this Mythos story. Let me get the episode number here, pulling it up here live. It was a couple weeks ago. Where was it? It was, there we go. Episode 754, if you want to go listen to it. So at the time, right, I waited a couple of days. I wanted to, read some of the reports, kind of, see what other smart people were thinking. But I acknowledged at the time that it was probably a mix of a scary, capable model and a little bit of marketing. Now I think it's probably mostly marketing and maybe a model that's highly capable. And also following this, in an interview this week, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman called Anthropic's promotion of Mythos fear-based marketing. And after this leak, I'm kind of starting to believe him on that, right? I don't know. Can you actually believe that a model is so powerful in cybersecurity, right? In these zero-day vulnerabilities. Essentially, they're saying Mythos was able to find all of these bugs that have existed in the web for decades, right? And the smartest humans alone, the smartest cyber hackers couldn't find them, but only Claude Mythos could, right? Because it was that good, right? And when you look at that and you're like, okay, well, that's convincing. And, if that is true, which Anthropic did say it was true, right, then it does have scary implications. But even at the time, I'm like, okay, there's still a little bit of marketing because this has always been, Anthropic's approach to things, right? Its CEO has talked relentlessly about how AI is going to take 50% of, white collar jobs because it's so good. And he's been, going on any news program to say that. And, with the latest Mythos, they were saying it's too powerful to release. No, I'm saying probably not, right? So not only this Discord leak, but we also saw GPT 5.5 just released a couple of days ago as well. And when it came to benchmarks, right, there were some benchmarks that GPT 5.5 was better than Mythos on. So it's like, okay, is this true, right? If a model is way too powerful in some coding benchmarks and security benchmarks, GPT-5.5 is either better or just barely neck and neck. It's like, is it too powerful at this point, or is it just marketing, right? Is Anthropic kind of sitting on this thing, knowing that they have an IPO coming up, knowing that they can't compete with OpenAI on users? They can't, right? And I don't think they ever will be able to. So I don't know. Is it one of those things, since it's so powerful, they have to sit on it, or are they trying to drum up excitement right before they go public? All right. That's it for our big stories. But now we're going to end with our what's new and what's next, kind of our bullet point recap of everything else that didn't make, top 8 news story of the week. And also keep in mind, we do go over just kind of AI or large language model feature releases on Fridays, on our Friday features section. So some of these we might be talking about on Friday, and then anything that comes out, between today and Thursday, we'll probably be diving into as well. All right. So here we go. Copilot's new agentic capabilities in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint are generally available. Yeah, agent mode now generally available in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. So we had SpaceX, kind of bought the rights to acquire, Cursor more or less. So it could be up to a $60 billion deal. And there is a report going on that SpaceX maybe acquiring Mistral as well. So it looks like SpaceX could be, forming a super team before it goes public itself. Claude released live artifacts in Claude Cowork. Pretty impressive. I've been enjoying those. An AI robot broke a human record for a half marathon. Not scary at all. Adobe unveiled Agents for Business at its conference. Codex announced Chronicle. Oh, I already talked about that. Good. We can skip over that one. OpenAI released a privacy filter, an open weight model they released for detecting and redacting PII in text. So that's pretty huge. And I think developers and builders are really going to like that, because they'll be able to build more things that deal with PII. Anthropic says engineering errors caused month-long Claude code quality drop. Yeah, that one, I don't know. Maybe we'll see if I do an episode just on that. But yeah, Anthropic has been saying that they don't degrade their models. And then, they've been saying this for a long time. And then they're like, oh, psych. Yeah, we've been degrading it. And we did. HeyGen released Hyperframes, which looks really good. An open source Apache 2 tool that converts HTML and GSAP into MP4s. DeepSeek V4 was released, and somewhat underwhelming on benchmarks, right? I thought it was going to be a top news story, but I looked at it, I'm like, it's not even, not close to frontier models, and it's not even the top open source model. So yeah, I don't think, there goes all the DeepSeek buzz. Sorry, everyone that thought V4 was going to be a frontier model. It's not. Distilling can only get you so far. Cohere is reportedly merging with Germany's Aleph Alpha, creating a $20 billion transatlantic AI powerhouse. OpenAI and Microsoft expanded their partnership with cybersecurity, where Microsoft gains trusted access to cyber-capable models. ServiceNow and IBM stocks fell 17% and 9% respectively as AI disruption fears rocked software and ETFs. Microsoft is reportedly offering buyouts to about 9,000 U.S. employees Amid massive AI infrastructure investment, OpenAI released ChatGPT for clinicians, offering free access to verified US clinicians. NotebookLM, I'm loving this update. They can now auto label your sources. Man, NotebookLM is one of my absolutely favorite tools. So this update will be well received by power users such as myself. I'm always looking back at my sources because I bring them in so fast and I'm like, what are all these? All right, so that's great. Microsoft is investing $18 billion by the end of the decade to expand AI data centers in Australia. Claude now plugs into popular consumer apps like Spotify, Uber, Instacart, TripAdvisor, Audible, TurboTax, and more. The trial between Elon Musk and OpenAI over $134 billion in damages is beginning on Monday. Google DeepMind released Deep Research Max, all right, which uses Gemini 3.1 Pro agents for exhaustive research. Unfortunately, only available on the API side right now, except there is actually an agent that you can use inside of Google's AI Studio. I do believe you have to use your own usage on that, but still, it's been impressive, right? I've checked it out. It's really good. So if you haven't used that, go check it out. All right. And last but not least, Meta signed a multi-year deal for AI workloads with AWS Graviton. All right. That is a wrap, y'all. Don't spend hours every single day trying to keep up with what's happening in AI and how it impacts your business. Just join us on Monday as we bring you the AI news that matters. All right. So I hope this was helpful. If you're listening on the podcast, appreciate your support. Please make sure to follow and subscribe to the show. Reach out to me on LinkedIn as well. Tell me how we can make everyday AI better. So thank you for tuning in. Hope to see you back tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Everyday AI. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps keep us going. For a little more AI magic, visit youreverydayai.com and sign up to our daily newsletter so you don't get left behind. Go break some barriers, and we'll see you next time.